Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. This is the Housing Justice Institute on California's affordable housing crisis, presented by Making Housing and Community Happen. I'll be your MC for the night. My name's Teresa. Nice to meet you. And then we're joined by Anthony, Jill, and Bert, who are also going to be presenting. Thank you so much for making the time to join us to discuss this really important topic. I love how many of you have been active in the chat. If you haven't yet introduced yourself in the chat, please say what your name is, where you're currently located, and how you heard about this event. We are going to be presenting for about an hour, and then we're going to have a discussion in the end. We're also going to have a poll. And that poll is the purpose of this forum is to just get the conversation started this year on the causes and solutions to our affordable housing crisis. And so we want to make sure we take note of the topics you're interested in covering, and we'll do forums in the future on those specific topics. I will be monitoring my mute button, so we will have a discussion at the end of our presentation, but in the beginning, it will just be our presenters speaking. But please utilize the chat. We will be monitoring it. We are saving it. And if I haven't, oh, one other thing, let me drop in a donation link. Making Housing and Community Happen is a nonprofit. And if you are so inclined, please take a look at our website. And I'm dropping in a donation link here in the chat. So you can check that out. I'll be dropping it in the chat again later in the evening. And I believe that is it from me. And I'm going to hand it over to Bert, who's going to do an overview of the work that Anthony, and Jill do in our Housing Justice Forum series.
Great. Awesome. Can you see that?
Yes. Mhm.
Hoping that it works. Uh, awesome. Okay, it worked. We were having trouble with this in the when we were testing it out. But yeah, this is what we've been doing lately. What's happening in MHCH. So first, local organizing and advocacy. So this is how our group started out back over 25 years ago, back in the 90s. We were a ragtag group of people that just were organizing and advocating for affordable housing, for housing justice here in Pasadena. And so I just want to mention two of our major victories that we've done over the years. Just for the sake of time, I'm just going to talk about two of them. But when I first got involved, the first campaign I got involved in was inclusionary housing. And that's inclusionary housing is when developers, when they build in your city, they have to set aside or include a certain number of units as affordable. So we did a campaign, and in 2001, we won the first inclusionary housing ordinance here in Pasadena, and that was a 15% ordinance. So when developers built 10 or more units, they had to include 15% of them as affordable for moderate, low, and very low income families. And that is according to the area median income of Los Angeles County. And then, or they could pay an in lieu fee, but the fee went into a fund to build affordable housing. And then in 2019, Jill led a second campaign and got the percentage up to 20%. So out of that one policy, two campaigns, one policy, we've gotten more than 1,600 units of affordable housing throughout Pasadena. Over 700 of them are the actual inclusionary units, and then the rest are the ones that were built with the in lieu fee. Another campaign was Heritage Square South. This is 69 units of permanent supportive housing for previously unhoused seniors. Anthony led this campaign, and it was an amazing campaign. The site was mostly vacant. There was a Church's Chicken there, but it was mostly vacant, and there were some unhoused seniors that were living there or sleeping there at night. And one night we slept with them, and then later we packed out city council meetings, and we won this in 2018. And then it took a number of years to get the funding and to get it built, but by 2024, it opened up in I believe I can't remember which month it was. I think it was late summer of 2024. It opened up, and you can go and see it there today, corner of Orange Grove and Fair Oaks. It's a beautiful new building, 69 units of permanent supportive housing. So that's just an example of two of our big victories. These aren't even all of our big victories. We've had other big victories and a lot of smaller victories. It's just been amazing what we've been able to do over the years, especially since we became a nonprofit in 2018. Um, so we've been able to do a lot more. Jill and Anthony got a nonprofit going. Recently we've started a couple of housing justice fellowships. These are meet groups that meet in homes, and we form a fellowship and bond together. And out of that, we work for housing justice. There's one on first and third Wednesdays at 7 p.m. And then also on second and fourth Fridays at 2:15 p.m. And the people in this picture, by the way, I don't know them. I didn't have a chance to take a picture of our actual Housing Justice Fellowship, but so I got this off the internet. But I promise you, the people in our Housing Justice Fellowship are just as good looking as these people in the picture. So if you want to join a Housing Justice Fellowship, contact me, Bert Newton, either email or you can call or text me, bert@makinghousinghappen.org, or my phone number is 626-993-7958, 626-993-7958. Also, in terms of community organizing, so Jill has been working on North Fair Oaks for 11 years with that community, and with that community has developed a vision plan for that community to be adopted by the city. The vision plan includes affordable housing, complete streets, small business revitalization, and designating that area as the Black Legacy District, because back in the day, that was a hub of the Black community in Pasadena. So in the last year, we've gone to the Planning Commission twice and had really good experiences. I mean, it was just some of the best community organizing and just the best meetings. It was very upbeat. We had 30 speakers each time. And the Planning Commission and the staff have agreed that basically virtually all of our vision plans should be adopted by the city. Now, it still needs to go to the city council, but we're making a lot of good progress on that. Safe parking, there's around 15,000 or so people in Los Angeles County that live in their vehicles. That's where they live. They're unhoused other than that. But for many years, until 2021, there was no safe parking program in the whole San Gabriel Valley. So in April of 2021, we started the first safe parking program in the San Gabriel Valley here in Pasadena at Trinity Lutheran Church. So there they have 10 safe places to park. They have access to a bathroom and a break room in the church and electricity. They get case management services from Friends Indeed, which was started by the churches of Pasadena. And they get access to mental health treatment, referrals to other resources, and they get linkage to permanent housing. So we have so far housed 18 people through this program. And then earlier this year, we helped advocate for a second safe parking program at All Saints Church. So we were able to do that earlier this year. And that program hasn't gotten up and running yet because they're still working with the funding for the security. But once it does, it'll have 25 spaces, so an even bigger program. So if you want to if you know somebody who's living in their vehicle and you want to refer them to the program that we have going at Trinity Lutheran, call Friends Indeed at 626-797-2402, 626-797-2402. Congregational Land Partners. So for about 6 years or so, we had a committee within MHCH that consulted with congregations to build affordable housing. And then last year, we spun them off into their own 501c3, their own nonprofit. And so now they're called Congregational Land Partners. And they still consult with congregations to build affordable housing. We're still very much involved with them. Jill is the president of the board and organizes with them. Since they began as a committee here, over 100 congregations have approached them wanting to have affordable housing on their land. They've been able to work with 37 of them and plan 1,700 units of affordable housing throughout Southern California. That's how many units are planned. It takes a long time to get these things done. And finally, one of them is breaking ground. First United Methodist Church of Inglewood is breaking ground, and they're going to have 60 units on their campus, plus a music center. So it's going to be really great. And then the Congregational Land Partners also is mentoring um, uh, teams in other parts of the country to do this work. Next, I want to mention our one-day housing justice institutes. This is something that Jill has done around the country. Um, so it says one day housing justice, but actually this is takes months of preparation. What happens is Jill gets invited into a community and then works with a small group for months studying their city, their community, their history of housing, and looking at what might work in their community. And then they have one day where they bring a wider group of people in the community together. They present what they have learned and they talk about it. And the idea is that out of that is birthed a housing justice team for that community. So it kind of replicates what we've done with MHCH in Pasadena and other communities. And Jill has done them as far away as North Carolina, 7 of them in Colorado, and a number of them here in Pasadena. And they have birthed housing justice teams. There's one next door in Arcadia that was birthed out of one of these one-day housing justice institutes. It's called Creative Housing Options of Arcadia, and they're starting to win some major victories over there. So she's working this year with some people in Oceanside and also in Stanislaus County for to do a one-day housing justice institute. And I think she may mention that later in the evening. But that is what is happening at MHCH. So I'll hand it back over to Teresa.
Thanks, Burr. And there was a ton of interest in the chat, people wanting to have your contact information, people hoping to get a copy of your presentation. So if anyone has other questions about the MHCH's work, please continue to drop those questions in the chat and Bert can respond. And any other questions or comments you have about any of our the topics we present today, please drop those in the chat as well. And we'll be handing it over to Anthony Manusis, who is going to give a brief overview of the need for more market rate and more affordable housing, and then start going into some of the reasons why we are in the position we're in California and what we can do about it. So, Anthony, take it away.
Okay, Teresa, I'll be glad to. And hopefully, uh, you can all see this, but I can't. I'm seeing just you.
Yeah, it's black right now.
Okay, let me try it again. Okay, slideshow
There we go. We can see
from
it.
the beginning. Okay. Can you see it?
For some reason, it's not going to full screen, but that doesn't matter. You can just keep it on the other mode.
Okay, I'm going to try one more time because. Okay, so you can see
It
this
says to
part of it, but
double
what I,
click,
but
double
what,
click. Yeah.
okay. Anyway, so tonight I'm going to talk about the affordability crisis and what causes it and some of the solutions. Um, so first, I want to start by defining what affordability actually means. This is a technical term used in the affordable housing world. Uh, your housing is affordable if it costs you less than 30% of your income. That's the definition of affordability. Over 50% of California renters exceed this threshold. The scale of the gap, California needs 4 million affordable units. And that's because median home prices are more than double the national average. And in addition, rents are rising 44% and incomes rose only 11% since the year 2000. And now 70% of low income renters are cost burdened. And another way to look at the need is through something called the Regional Housing Needs Assessment. Now, the state of California requires every city to do a study every 8 years of the housing needs in their city. And they have to look at how many people are low income, very low income, and then to determine and moderate and above average income, and then to assess what the need is. So this is Oceanside, California, where the need for very low, as you can see in the green column, they need about 1,200 plus units of affordable housing, and they only produced 79 in the last 5 years. For very low, they have another 1,200. They've only produced 264 in the last 5 years. For low income residents, they need about 718 units of housing. They only produce 203. For moderate rate, they need 883, but they only produce 549. But for above moderate, for luxury and market rate, they needed 2,500 and they produced 2,200. So California is producing, and this is typical of most cities, more than enough housing for the people who are earning more than above average income, more above median income. But we're way behind when it comes to affordable housing. And that's how we know these numbers. And the effects of lack of affordability on low and middle income families is pretty significant. Many households spend 50 or more % of their income on housing, and therefore they have to cut back on healthcare, education, and food. And many low-income families suffer from housing insecurity. Nearly 50%, 60% of renters face unstable housing, the threat of eviction, frequent moves, and these undermine the quality of life for these residents. So what are some of the solutions? One solution is to provide vouchers, sometimes called Section 8 or housing choice vouchers, to eligible individuals. Recipients pay 1/3 of their income on rent, and the government pays the rest. Now, if housing is a human right, and we believe it is, and there's a shortage of affordable housing for low-income people, it makes sense to provide housing vouchers to everyone who income qualifies. However, only about 25% of those who apply and are eligible for vouchers receive them. Additionally, only about half of the people who receive them actually find housing because they only get a limited amount of time to look. It's often hard to find housing that will accept these vouchers. Another solution that helps with affordability is rent control. And rent control helps to stabilize the cost of housing, as does anti-rent gouging laws, which are really necessary. Pasadena successfully passed Measure H, but now landlords are trying to undermine this measure with a ballot initiative. The third solution is to subsidize the construction of affordable housing through tax credits and government subsidies. This solution has produced over 1,000 units alone in Pasadena, including what Bert mentioned, housing at Heritage Square South. Then inclusionary zoning, Bert talked a little bit about this. This requires developers to set aside a percentage of new development for affordable housing. And this is a great policy because it spreads affordable housing throughout the city, not just in one low-income area, but even in upscale neighborhoods, because of the fact that it's built, that the housing is included in apartment buildings that might be for people who are above market rate. So then another obstacle to affordability are zoning laws. Single family zoning dominates 75% of residential land. And that limits high density development and affordable housing options. Then there are compliance costs. There's environmental design regulations. They also, while they're good up to a point, they raise the cost of housing. And permitting costs and delays can raise the cost of housing. As business say, time is money, and sometimes you have to wait 18 or more months to go through the permitting process, and that increases the cost of housing and discourages new development. So there's lots of opportunity for reform. We'll talk a little bit about some of these. But first, another obstacle are NIMBYs. This phrase means not in my backyard. If you look on the left, you see a flyer that was put in the mailboxes of people in East Pasadena recently calling them to fight a really good affordable housing project in their neighborhood on Rosemead. 120 units of affordable housing, much of it for families, for people who lost their homes in the fire, for residents of our city. But the neighbors were outraged because it was 5 stories high. They didn't like the fact that they had affordable housing in their neighborhood. Fortunately, this was a by right project, which means that it could be built as long as it had met objective standards, but that didn't stop the NIMBYs from trying to prevent it. Oops. I left this one out. Funds for affordable housing can also be raised from a transfer tax. A transfer tax is paid when a property is sold. Los Angeles voters approved a transfer tax called ULA for properties sold for $5 million or more. This has generated hundreds of millions of dollars for affordable housing. Unfortunately, ULA had some drawbacks. It depressed housing production, and that resulted in fewer deed-restricted affordable housing units being built. So efforts are being made to fix ULA flaws, such as exempting new construction, imposing a tax only on properties 15 years older or more. So one of the things that, oh, yes, let me go back. I'm sorry, I'm a little out of order because the PowerPoint is not working the way it should. So I want to say a few things about NIMBYs. Single-family zoning was started 100 years ago to exclude people of color from white neighborhoods. Homeowners feel that they're entitled to have their home values increase faster than the cost of living. And this is something that many homeowners take for granted. And this ensures that home ownership becomes increasingly unaffordable. For example, Jill bought our home back in 1994, I think, for $140,000. It's now worth $1.3 million. And now, when she moved in, houses in this area were affordable. Many people of color lived here because they could afford to live here. Now it's unaffordable for most people. NIMBYs resist multifamily and affordable housing in their neighborhood. They believe in many myths about affordable housing, like it brings crime and lowers property values, all of which are not true. And the state has passed laws that allow affordable housing to be built by right, that is, without a community approval, because without these bills, affordable housing would be extremely difficult to build. One of the things that often comes up to thwart affordable housing is CEQA. This is environmental reviews. It's been weaponized to delay and thereby make infeasible affordable housing projects. There is a ballot initiative that would help. It was proposed by the Chamber of Commerce, and it would make it would sort of streamline the process for environmental review so that it wouldn't have to take quite as long to happen. Downzoning is one way to make housing less affordable. In some communities, you can only build 1 unit on an acre of land, like in La Cañada. So the price of housing is really high there. Downzoning means you reduce the number of units can be built per acre. And it's often impossible to build multifamily and affordable housing because of downzoning. For example, in North Fair Oaks in Pasadena, it was downzoned from 48 to 16 units per acre, and that prevented multifamily apartments from being built and stifled development for 20 years. And we have successfully advocated to upzone this area and increase the density to 48 units per acre, which allows for 3-story apartments. Now it's possible to build affordable housing, which is a win for the community. I'm going to close by saying 3 things that would really reduce the cost of housing. The first is very controversial. Eliminate single-family zoning. Minneapolis upzoned the entire city to allow duplexes and triplexes and what had been single-family lots, which effectively triples the housing capacity in many neighborhoods. Notice this is not about building skyscrapers in single-family neighborhoods, just increasing the possibility for duplexes and triplexes. And the second thing that would help is to allow more housing density near transit stops by allowing construction of 3 to 6-story buildings. And California's done that through SB 79, but many municipalities are very angry about this. They don't want to see density in their city. They want to be able to have what they call local control. But we think it's a very good bill because you should have higher density near transit stops. And the last thing is very simple. You can eliminate off-street minimum parking requirements. One of the things that raises the cost of housing is the cost of parking. It can cost anywhere from $50,000 to $70,000 for a parking space in an apartment building. So that adds to the cost. If you can park on the street, it lowers the cost of housing. And for many affordable housing projects, they don't require any on-site parking, and that's how they make the projects affordable. So that's what I have to share. I hope that's helpful in understanding some of the ways that housing has become unaffordable and ways that we can help to make it more affordable.
Thank you very much, Anthony. And I bet there are some folks out there who have thoughts, comments, questions about Anthony just presented a whole encyclopedia of knowledge in a couple of minutes. So please don't be shy. Utilize that chat because type in your question while you have it now so that you don't forget it, and we'll make sure to answer it when we do discussions later. And then, Anthony, did you also want to talk about, were you going to talk about funding for affordable housing, or are we going to
Uh,
Jill next?
no, that's not on my,
Oh,
I'm done with my presentation.
okay, well, thank you very much for it.
Okay, thanks.
All right, and then now we're going to be going over to Jill to talk about building costs and the fees needed to build affordable housing. And it's not just so simple as, well, let's build affordable housing. No, Jill's going to tell us about why it's a bit more complicated than that.
Sure. Thank you for that introduction, Teresa. I'm going to start with this chart. And just to give you an idea of what it costs to construct affordable housing. So if you look at the comparison of Texas, 157,000 for one unit. Then Colorado, a little more, actually quite a bit more. And California bumps all the way up to 415,000. Then it's broken down by some of the different metro areas. Look how high it is for LA, 429 this is for market rate housing. So if we drop down and look at the affordable part of this chart, Texas is 228, Colorado a little more, California 640,000. That's outrageous. And so there's reasons for this. The big question is why. And so I'm going to go through some of the ideas and think through with me what is causing this high cost. And so first of all, I'm going to mention just the building cost, like labor, materials, land, and fees. So so let's start first at the hard costs. It's called hard costs that are driving the prices up. First, like land and materials and labor. Land cost is 3 times higher than in Texas. This is due to the high demand, especially for properly zoned land. So Anthony mentioned about single family zoning. 75% of cities are single family zoned, leaving very little space for affordable housing. So developers, affordable housing developers, they're all looking for land that's permissible, that allows for the kind of density that will make the affordable housing affordable. And they're also looking for housing that's close to amenities like schools, stores, public transport. In order to get the funding for affordable housing, you have to be close to those. It's called high opportunity zones. Bert will be talking about investors, and Anthony's already talked about NIMBYs, but those two things also have caused land costs to increase by the preventing for the higher zoning needed. And so I'm going to mention now the materials needed. So there is such a high demand for all the materials needed to build affordable and really, for that matter, any kind of housing. A lot of inflation, global supply chains that are being disrupted dramatically right now in the world. So this is increasing construction costs by about 19%. And that's a lot. Every year is that 19% more in what it costs to actually get the materials you need. I'm going to mention now labor shortages and prevailing wage requirements. And so there's a severe shortage of skilled construction workers that, and what I mean by skilled, it's very precise, the word and what it means when it comes to the kind of labor needed that knows how to do this work. So just the fact that they cannot find enough labor adds to the cost because it's very difficult to spend time looking to find just the right workers. ICE raids have also pushed many that are excellent workers to be too fearful to go out and do this work. Higher wage requirements for tax credits. I mentioned wage requirements, prevailing wage. We believe in this. We think it's very important that people building affordable housing should be able to live without having to be in affordable housing. But these wage requirements can be up to $75 to $100 an hour for the kind of skilled folks that are needed to do this work. So I'm going to also mention briefly regulations, which Anthony mentioned. So there's a real cost to the time that it takes for inspectors and compliance officers to do their work. I'm just going to give you a brief example of my friend Maria Teresa. She's an architect, and she has designed an ADU for her property, and she thought she had everything ready to go. She went down, the inspector was taking forever to show up at her house. And, she's counting the months to go by. Finally, the inspector comes and he finds problems. And so she's got to fix all those. And then she has to wait again. And then she was ready for her occupancy report. And he delayed and delayed. So months later, she finally gets her occupancy report. So can you imagine all those months of rent that she can't collect because the city did not have enough folks to come out in a timely way to make sure everything was in compliance. So I'm going to mention a few ideas around what's called soft cost. So the soft costs are interesting. We don't always think about this, but funding sources, that's something that Teresa mentioned just now. It's typically 5 or 6, or I know one developer that had 20 different funding sources in order to get their affordable housing development built. So is this crazy making to have to go and have what they call a capital stack that is so long in order to finally get this housing built? And that takes a long time to get that capital stack all put together. There's also fees. There's fees for financing. There's fees for architectural work, fees for engineering, fees, legal fees. There's lawyers involved. There's local government fees. So I'm going to show you in closing one thing that our city of Pasadena is doing to help lower the cost of what's called impact fees for affordable housing. So I'm going to do my best here to try to get this open for you. Can you see? I think I need to do a share. There we go. There we go. Share. Okay, can you see this chart here of fees for our city? So
Yeah,
Tournament of Roses, and then just below that are the residential impact fees. So you can see here for a studio and then for 1 bedroom, 23,000 just for the fees that the city requires for what's called impact fees. So impact is the impact that your new housing in your city will have on parks and on schools to help fund these amenities, these important resources needed when more people move into your community. You can see that this can go all the way up to 44,000 if it's 5 bedrooms or more. But then drop down and look at how much they charge if that development is affordable. Only 1,234. And so it's a great model for other cities to adopt. They should be dropping these fees even completely if they can for any affordable unit. And we've mentioned inclusionary, where a percentage of housing is set aside as affordable. So even the market rate units within a development that that accompany the affordable units within an inclusionary development, they also get a significant discount, as you can see. And so it's a great policy. I'm going to stop my share and end my little session now, but you may have questions about this. And when we do the poll at the end, it may be some of these things you'd like to learn more about in our future housing justice forums this year. So thank you for your time and allowing me to speak.
Thank you, Jill, and thanks for all of the great questions and thoughts in the chat. I am vigorously taking notes of all of those, so we'll be able to get to every single one of them after our presentation. And then now Bert is going to talk a bit about gentrification and displacement.
Yeah, sorry, I'm looking for my PowerPoint. I don't know why it's not on the. Hold on a second. Sorry about this. Let me make sure. Let me try to do the share again. I think that's it right there. Okay. Can do it from the beginning. Okay. Gentrification and displacement. So I'm going to start off with a story here in Pasadena. Janae Johnson was born and raised in Pasadena. After 22 years of renting the last apartment that she and her family were in, the landlord gave them a notice to vacate. After 6 months of living in hotels in Ontario, the family split up, moving in with various friends and relatives. Some family members moved to Lancaster, some stayed in Ontario, while Janae herself moved to Las Vegas. She was later able to move to Pomona and now commutes from there to Pasadena for church and various other things. She really wants to return to live in Pasadena. But gentrification has become a significant issue in Pasadena and Altadena over the last 30 years, reshaping neighborhoods and impacting long-term residents. Gentrification typically involves an influx of wealthier individuals and businesses that cater to them into historically working class or minority communities, leading to increased property values and rents. While this change can bring some improvements, such as renovated homes, new businesses, and enhanced public services, it often comes at the cost of displacing existing residents who can no longer afford to live in their neighborhoods. In Pasadena, gentrification is evident in areas like Northwest Pasadena, where rising rents and home prices have made it difficult for families to remain in their homes. According to one source, the average Pasadena rent between 1999 and 2000 increased 64%. Another source reveals that between 2009 and 2020, rents rose another 30%. And another source shows that rents for 1 to 3 bedroom units in Pasadena almost doubled between 2016 and 2025. Altadena, once known for its diverse population and affordable housing, has also experienced similar trends, with rising costs pushing out lower income families and communities of color. The impact of gentrification isn't limited to housing. It also affects businesses, schools, and community organizations. Long-standing businesses that cater to the original residents may be replaced by upscale boutiques, cafes, and restaurants targeting newcomers. This transformation can erode the cultural fabric of the neighborhood, leading to a loss of identity and community cohesion. There are multiple policy solutions, and some have already been implemented locally, but could be strengthened. These include rent control, inclusionary zoning policies, which I mentioned earlier, requiring and incentivizing market rate builders to include affordable units, and simply increasing the supply of affordable housing. Additionally, community land trusts can empower residents to collectively own and manage property, preventing displacement and preserving affordability. Local governments can also offer property tax relief for long-term low-income homeowners, ensuring that they are not forced out by rising taxes. And finally, investing in public services and infrastructure without triggering displacement, often called just green enough development, can improve neighborhoods while minimizing the risk of gentrification. By adopting a range of policy solutions and ensuring that the voices of those most affected are heard, Pasadena and Altadena and other communities can work toward more equitable and inclusive communities. So that's gentrification and displacement. Next, I want to talk about the fact that investors are buying up a lot of homes. So I want to start out with another story here. This past fall, the tenants of the Pasadena Gateway Villas at 290 North Hudson Avenue experienced the reality of an investor buyout of their building. Hines, a global real estate investment manager with $91.8 billion in assets across 30 countries, bought the building, after which the tenants were charged $400 to $500 per month in fees for services that were previously included in the rent. And according to one resident, 20% rent increase on top of that, which would be illegal. Terry Ross, an 8-year resident, said that the first notice of ownership change came in the form of a lease renewal letter posted on their door with no opportunity to review the new lease terms in advance. We're hearing a lot of stories like this in California and across the nation, but it's not just large investors that are buying up homes. The larger portion of investors actually seem to be those on the smaller side. Real estate investors, large and small, made up 10.8% of all residential real estate transactions in 2024. This marks the highest share on record, according to Realtor.com, with data stretching back more than 2 decades. The Guardian reports that 19% of homes in California and 20% nationwide are owned by investors. And back in 2021, a study by Strategic Actions for a Just Economy found that in Los Angeles, more than 2/3 of all rentals were owned by speculative investment vehicles, with 70% of tenants living in buildings owned by investors or large landlords. The program business website states that investor purchases continue to reshape the U.S. housing market, with many routinely paying between 1.8% and 4.3% above market value. These higher bids often come with cash offers, quick closings, and waived contingencies, enabling investors to outcompete traditional home buyers. The website inequality.org makes the charge that wealthy investors are acquiring property and holding units vacant, and that billionaire investors are entering the short-term rental industry, removing a substantial portion of rental housing from the market. Some strategies have been proposed to address this problem, including implementing stricter zoning laws to limit investor purchases in residential areas, or increasing property taxes on non-owner occupied homes to deter investors, or promoting community land trusts to keep homes affordable for local residents. Also encouraging local buyers through financial incentives and grants, and finally limiting how many homes can be purchased by large investors, especially after a disaster such as a wildfire. The governor has already taken one action with an executive order that prohibits speculators from making unsolicited lowball cash offers to homeowners who lost houses in the fire. These remedies would likely have popular support, but big money interests would likely oppose them with big public campaigns and also lawsuits. So vigilant grassroots organizing would be needed to make them successful. So that is my presentation on those two. So I think we're ready to go forward with discussion. Teresa?
Thanks, Bert. Let's see, I'm quickly jotting down the last question. And then I have a presentation that I'm going to present also. So
Oh,
I'm going to
sorry about
present.
that, Teresa. I forgot. Yeah, you are presenting.
That's okay. That's okay. I'm excited to get to discussion as well. So, my presentation is going to be on Proposition 13. The everybody else put incredible designing work into their presentation. Mine's a bit more simple. A lot of people in California know about Proposition 13. It is something, but happy to go into detail for all of you. So it was passed in 1978. It is a constitutional amendment that drastically capped property taxes in California. The intention, I believe, was good and noble, and it was to curb skyrocketing property taxes to make sure that folks who are retired or low income are able to stay in their homes, which has definitely happened, and that's been really great here in California. And it did this by capping property tax rates. And so it limits a general tax levy to 1% of the assessed value. And it is only reassessed at the market rate once there is a change in home ownership. So property tax value is reassessed once someone sells their home to someone else. And so there have been a plethora of negative consequences to Prop 13 that impact much more than just our housing stock. There have been a loss in tax revenue for public services, including parks, libraries. There has been a reliance on state funding. So before, local governments used to get funds from property taxes, but with a lack of funding coming the from property taxes, there is a reliance on state funding. And as Anthony mentioned earlier, with ULA in the city of Los Angeles, cities and activists, different types of advocates are having to get creative and look at fees and user charges to fund public services since they don't have access to as much property tax as we used to. A huge impact that we've seen in California is impact on schools. After the passage of Proposition 13, there was an immediate 60% drop in local education revenue because most of our school districts funding comes from property taxes. That's why we have generally better funded schools in wealthier areas. And so it plunged California from a top funded state to below the national average, creating long-term financial instability, reducing specialized programs, and increasing reliance on state income taxes to fund our education system. And then getting into housing disparities. It creates a disparity for new buyers where long-term homeowners are paying much less in property taxes as new homeowners, and some call it a regressive tax, that younger folks then have to pay even more in property taxes for an equivalent home value, than folks who have been in their home longer. And there's an unfair burden to tenants because although both residential and commercial properties benefit from Proposition 13, we haven't seen those same benefits trickle down to tenants, regardless whether they are residential tenants or commercial tenants. And we've seen rental rates skyrocket throughout the state. And then I wanted to mention, even the realtors found Prop 13 problematic, and there have been countless attempts to amend Proposition 13. Sometimes there's been multiple times when it's been amended and strengthened, and there's been attempts to amend it and weaken it. And in 2020, an unlikely coalition came together of the Democratic Party, the governor, the different leaders in the state legislature, labor unions, realtors, and the Chamber of Commerce to amend Proposition 13. And so Prop 13 is what is called a constitutional amendment. And so it's a lot harder to amend or change and other types of legislation that goes through the state. So you need a 2/3 vote in each chamber to refer a constitutional amendment to the ballot. So first you have to do a legislative process saying, hey, we want to try to amend this piece of legislation. And then you have to take it to voters, and then voters need, I think, I believe that you also need 2/3 of voters in order to change it as well. So it was a huge hurdle that ultimately passed. And so how Prop 13 was amended back in 2020 through Proposition 19 was it allowed homeowners over 55, individuals who are disabled or wildfire victims to be able to transfer property tax base to a new home anywhere in the state. And the idea was to free up existing housing stock where families were raised. Perhaps you had a retired couple who are empty nesters in a 3, 4, 5 bedroom house, and it make sense for them to be in a 3, 4, 5 bedroom house when there are other families currently in 1 or 2 bedroom apartments because there's not enough housing stock. So the goal was to open up some housing stock and let folks who are retired and don't need the space to move out, growing families to move in. Um, and so it took a huge unlikely coalition in order to pass Prop 13. And I mention this because even though Prop 13 is a huge hindrance to a lot of uh, public services, much needed public services, and our affordable housing stock, it shows how much work is needed in order to change Prop 19. There have been other reforms like the split roll tax, and the split roll tax is this idea that we can we shouldn't thinking about splitting up the taxing on commercial businesses at market rates rather than residential properties, but that group has had a hard time getting enough of a coalition to, change the constitutional amendments. And I do mention in here that not all reforms to Prop 13 are in our favor. There's actually a new initiative that's going to be on the ballot this November that the Howard Jarvis Tax Association is promoting, and that will be to strengthen Prop 13. So I'll be voting no on that one. Prop 13 is a huge hurdle. A lot of folks continue to bump their heads about what can we do about it. But all I can say for now is make sure you vote no on the Save Proposition 13 Act of 2026 in your November ballot, and we'll continue advocating for ways to fund housing solutions locally.
Thank you, Teresa. Yeah.
My pleasure. All right, now it looks like we are now going to go over to, let me find my correct tabs. Oh, shoot. I think I deleted my whole window with all my questions. I am sorry, I'm going to have to find that. Here it is. The challenges of hosting and all right, sorry about that, everybody. I have now found all my screens. So we're going to do some Q&A. I've sourced some questions from the chat, and then I'll ask them to Jill, Anthony, and Bert. And the first question that I want to ask, it's bundled up. Mia Lalonde and Cather T asked similar questions. First question from Mia Lalonde is why cities don't want more affordable housing because they don't collect as many fees? Second question, which is related, is did I read the graph correctly that it takes more to build affordable housing than market rate housing? Jill, can you speak to those?
That's a good question. I wonder if we could change the view so we can all see each other.
Sure, I'll do that.
That'd be great. Thank you, Mia, for that question. What's lost in revenue from the affordable housing is very little compared to the gain that a city is getting. So the majority of people in a city that are the workers are at the very low income level. And cities, at least ours, is highly committed to making sure that our workers live and work close to their jobs and places of worship. And so how do we do that? We need to do everything we can to encourage affordable housing development. You'll end up saving so much in terms of the quality of life for your residents, where they don't have to travel as far to get to the city. And so the priority in our city is for those who live and work already in our city that are all mostly at that very low income level. And so the fees are important, but those can be stronger in the market rate arena. As you saw with the arena numbers that Anthony showed from Oceanside, there's an abundance of market rate housing and very little affordable. So it's really not that much the city's losing in revenue. Yeah.
But she is correct that she did read the graph right, that affordable housing actually costs more to build than market rate.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but that money's not coming from cities.
yeah,
Mhm,
can
That
I
right.
money's
can I add
that
something? Oh, go ahead, Jill.
the money is coming from outside sources through tax credits typically, and so that actually brings revenue to cities. So we have a huge influx of additional money into a city when we do affordable housing because of outside sources and that are bringing in funding for those housing units. Yeah.
I'm
What
wondering though, she was wondering why it costs more to build affordable housing, despite where the funding comes from, why it costs more.
Oh, yeah.
oh
When you look at prevailing wages, that's often part of the deal. So we were able to get SB4 passed. And so that is a state policy that rezones every church in the state, every religious congregation in the state. And that requires the prevailing wage that I mentioned. And that adds a lot of cost to housing. It also helps workers to make sure they don't need affordable. And so we believe in it, but it definitely does increase the cost.
So
Yeah.
here's an
Jill,
example on that.
oh
I went to see, years ago, I went to see the affordable housing open house. It was in an older building right across from, I think it's the Hilton Hotel on Los Robles. And they had 4 affordable units, and they had one or two that you could walk through. So the footprint was exactly the same as the market, and they were
Mhm.
absolutely gorgeous, but they
Mhm.
didn't have like the most expensive countertops, the most expensive finishings, but otherwise they were exactly the same in the same building. So I'm curious why it would cost more to build that one than the market rate that's
Like,
right
I
down.
know Anthony, it's a great question. Anthony, I want to make sure he has a chance to share, but I'd like to answer this first. So when we passed the inclusionary, we made sure that there was no difference between the inclusionary units and the market rate units. And so they really should have the same granite countertops. They really supposed to have all that. Sometimes they do cut corners, and I don't know who's inspecting that to make sure they're all the same. But inclusionary is very different than affordable. So affordable usually comes with subsidies. With those inclusionary units that have market rate units included, or pardon me, affordable units included into market rate development, there's no subsidy with that. So I'm only talking about subsidized housing that's more expensive to build. The inclusionary is actually those units are built at no cost to the city because they get what's called density bonus. And so the state density bonus gives them, if they include very low income units, they get up to 35% more units. So those are market rate units that they get, and that more than covers the cost of those inclusionary units, if that makes sense. So Anthony, I know I kind of interrupted you. Why don't you go ahead and say what you're going to say?
yeah, so one of the reasons affordable housing is more expensive, as Jill pointed out, is because of prevailing wage. Also, they tend to be smaller projects. 60 to 120 units is typical for affordable housing, whereas market rate might be 200 or 300 units. And when you build bigger, you can build cheaper. So that's another reason for the cost factor. But a plus for affordable housing here in Pasadena is we have something called the 20-20-20 policy, that if the city puts any money into a project, and typically it does, like maybe $1 million for a $40 million project as kind of seed money. If the city invests, then uh, developers are encouraged to uh, purchase 20% of the materials in Pasadena, hire 20% of the construction workers in Pasadena, have 20% of the uh, uh, what do they call it? The people who supervise the construction. All of that is really can bring millions of dollars in investment into the city. So it's a real benefit for our city to have affordable housing because we have that 20-20-20 rule.
Yeah, that
Contractors, that was the word I was looking for. The contractors have to be 20% of the contractors have to be from
so
Pasadena.
just one development that we helped advocate for us and make sure it got passed brought in $6 million to the city through that 2020 rule that Anthony mentioned. So, what are some of the other questions, Teresa?
Yeah, that was a great discussion. Let's see. The next two questions are, I'm sorry to have favorites, but these are my two favorite questions of the night. Aaron Scott Walsh asked, how can we advocate for zoning changes? And Mia Lalonde asked, how do we present these solutions to our cities?
Yeah, good questions. Um, Bert, why don't you take the first part of that?
The zoning.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's zoning is a major problem. Can't remember which one, Anthony or Jill said that single family zoning actually began as a segregationist strategy, and it still divides communities economically and often by race, and it still has racial overtones. Um, well, there are state bills like SB 79, which is doing a little bit of overriding. There's a lot of state bills that tend to override local zoning. And one that we pushed for actually was to get affordable housing built on land belonging to churches and other religious organizations. And we ran a campaign here locally in Pasadena, and then we started a campaign with the state that ended up being SB4. Um, and that would override local zoning on those sites. So that's the kind of the way we've addressed it. But it's a really tough nut because um, a- especially the the more affluent people that live in single family areas really don't want any density anywhere near them. So it's really tough, but it's a really important battle to fight. So a lot of times when we did the overlay zone for churches and religious organizations here in the city, we won something, but it was very slight. We did a lot better at the state level. Um, the SB4 it changed a lot more of the zoning here in Pasadena than our local one did. So it tends to be at the state level where we're able to do that. Our organization mostly works at the local level, but we do join in at the state. I know there was somebody here that was uh, with abundant housing. That's how they heard about our thing. I saw it in the chat. Abundant housing and some other groups work more at a state level, and we often join them when they do. So, um, but I think that's the best way to do it.
Yeah.
Locally, it's very tough.
Yeah. Can I
Let me
mention?
just piggyback. Oh, go
Okay.
ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Jill. You go first.
Well, I just want to piggyback on this concept of zoning. That if you try to what they call spot zoning, try to rezone an area to make it feasible for affordable, it could cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, um, and easily 100,000 to get the zoning changed. So that's why if you can pass policies that can applied to a whole jurisdiction, the whole state or a whole county, it's uh, much better. And so, what were you going to say, Anthony?
Well, I was going to point out two wins that are important in this context. One of them was uh, safe parking. Safe parking was not a permitted use for churches because churches, when they were zoned for they were not zoned with safe parking in mind. So, so we had to get the city to rezone essentially, or to change the permitted use for all the churches, many of the churches, I think 69 sites, something like that in Pasadena. So that was a win. That's what made it possible to have safe parking at Lutheran, Trinity Lutheran, and also at All Saints. The other
Yeah.
thing is that every 20 years or so, every 20 years, the specific plans are revised along with the general plan. And this is an opportunity to change zoning. And this is a huge win that we had in Northwest Pasadena because they had downzoned the area to around 16 units per acre, and that stifled development for 20 years. And it really robbed the neighborhood of a lot of its property values. This was done because they wanted to prevent nursing homes from proliferating, but they ended up stopping any kind of development. So we were able to persuade the planning department and the planning commission to upzone to 48 units and to allow three-story apartments in that area, which allows for affordable housing. So that's another way you can affect local zoning when these specific plans come up for reconsideration.
Yeah, let me answer the second part of your question, Mia. I think it was your question. I'd like to know if you could tell me where you live, what city you're in. Are you
Dana
there?
Point.
Pardon me?
Dana Point.
Dana Point. Okay. So that's a small enough city that you could probably have a lot of leverage. Um, it's I think your question was related mostly to being able to rezone aspects of your city. And so the two ways that Anthony mentioned during the specific plan, that's usually every 20 years, the general plan every 20 years. But that's a long time to wait. And so um, it might be that right now their cycle in your city is looking at those specific plans. But as far as getting that base, the advocacy to make that happen, it's very hard for one person unless they're extremely highly motivated, know how to get a large group of people to show up. So when you've got NIMBY folks that are coming out in groves, we've had over 5,000 people show up to fight perfectly good senior housing projects. Like in San Dimas, and they ended up leaving. It was an excellent developer, beautiful project, and they ended up saying we're not gonna build now because there was so much negative support, and so lack of support. So that's where I do these one-day institutes, and so if you want to talk to me about how that happens in your city to build the base you need to be able to fight and really advocate. The word fight sometimes I'm not so comfortable with because I see that we need to be well equipped and well researched and be able to talk to our city leaders in a way that they will feel the support and be encouraged to do the right thing. So if they see so much negativity, it's very hard for them to vote against that. And they also are paid, not paid, but they get elected by those high-end folks that support their campaigns. So they're really between a rock and a hard place. So without a large number of advocates that are supporting something, it's very hard for them to say that they will make these changes in their city. So yeah.
Thanks for the great questions. So this is the first of many series in our Housing Justice Forum. And you all asked so many great questions, and I feel so bad we weren't able to get to all of them. But we are going to launch a poll to figure out what topics we should include moving forward. And I have taken down all of your questions, and we'll be able to reference your questions as well as we figure out the next Housing Justice Forums that we organize. And so, Anthony, would you be able to launch that poll? And then please make sure you say which topics you want us to discuss next, and we'll make sure to give the people what they want.
Okay, Teresa, I hope it works. I'm giving it a try.
How many people, how many things can they vote on?
I think you could multiple, but we'll see. Um,
And then, Sheree, I see
oh,
a question.
okay. All right, I'm launching. So just see how many you can pick, but at least pick one.
Okay, it looks like you can pick as many as you want.
Okay, that's great.
And be sure to scroll down because there's some
Yeah, there's a
others.
total of 14.
14. Mhm. Can you scroll down, Anthony, so people can, oh, I guess anyone can, yeah.
Yeah.
And then, Sheree, we'll get to your question in a bit.
So it looks like 6 have participated out of 12. So please start making your choices. We're up to 8. That's great. 9. Someone said she wanted to choose them all, but restrained herself. Thank you. And now we're up to 9 out of 12. We got 3 more people to go, and then we'll put an end to the poll.
Was a three maybe
Oh,
us, right?
maybe that
Yeah.
might be us. I think you're right, Bert. Let me put an end to
Okay.
the poll then, because I haven't voted, and I don't think I can actually, because
Yeah,
I'm
I just X'd it out. Yeah, it came up for me too, but I just X'd it out.
Yeah.
all right. So, all right. So we will. We're up to 10. I think we're good. I'll end the poll, and then hopefully we can see the results. Share results. I've not done this before, so I'm not sure how that's.
I can read these out loud if
Sure,
that's helpful.
sure.
All right, these are interesting. Okay, so we have the two top vote getters are at 60% of everyone in this group is interested in learning more about the affordability gap, as well as vouchers and gentrification and displacement. And then, you know what? I'm going to take a quick screenshot of this before it gets lost. 1 second. Let me get the rest of these results in case we have a hard time finding them in the future. All right, and then we have two at 50%. So two first place, two second place, which are inclusionary zoning and rent control and tenant protections. And then we have four in third place, and they are SB 79, upzoning near transit stops, reducing building costs, and investors buying up homes, and excessive fees and permitting delays. So you all have given us your marching orders uh,
Yes.
in figuring out what presentations we should do next.
Okay. Well, that's very helpful to know.
Okay. So I've got this right here in front of me. I guess I can just exit out. Yeah, so
Should I
Sherry,
should
what
I
was the
stop
question?
sharing now? Is that okay?
Yeah, I think it's already been stopped. If
Okay.
people,
Yeah, you can X out of it.
Okay.
But yeah, Cherie has her hand up. Or Sherry, how do you pronounce your name?
That's okay, Cherie, you're correct. You're correct. Yes, I'm here in Chicago, and I'm just grateful to be here because Jill was part of a presentation that when I was interning, I was a graduate of McCormick when I was at McCormick,
oh, yeah.
and she was able to speak to be interviewed about affordable housing in churches, repurposing their buildings and things. And I'm glad to see that you are doing well too. That is, I praise God for that. And I just joined a church here in Hyde Park. It's called the United Church of Hyde Park. And just when, and the reason being is that I just felt that that was my call of going to seminary after spending time and working on that project that you were involved in. That affordable housing really speaks to me and the need for it. And so this was a church that when I first went to their the service, that was one of the things that they were going to do was that they were applying for a grant to have the building repurposed. And you know the whole story, you know, in your book about all of those kinds of things, right? And so I only know that they did not get the grant, and they said they were told that you have to apply various times. So I just thought I would maybe ask what would be some steps or things for me to look into to ask, and it's a very small congregation to ask them about the feasibility of something like that.
Excellent question.
Thank you.
Yeah, and it's a very big question. So I'm just going to briefly review the work we do. In the introduction about our nonprofit work, Bert Newton mentioned um, that we've spun that off as a separate nonprofit, the group where we help churches go down this path or any religious type of any stripe. And so we work only in Southern California because we have teams in Texas, Colorado, Washington State, Northern Cal. And so you might be interested in helping to start a team in your state. Um, and I'll go through the steps briefly on what we do. So once churches come to us, and we haven't even had to advertise, churches are eager for this kind of service. They go through a cohort, so we have anywhere from 8 to 12, 15 churches in a cohort. That's the entry point. We began to teach them about zoning and the zoning on their land and began to understand some aspects of what's feasible, what population they might want to serve. There's all different types of money, pots of money for different populations, senior housing, family housing, transitional age youth, permanent supportive housing, and so forth. And so then if they decide they want to go to the next step with us, then they sign an agreement, and then they go to step 2, which is a deep feasibility. We have architects and urban designers and affordable housing finance specialists on our team. And we do all this work for free until the end. And then, and I'll explain that briefly. But that second step allows congregations to begin to see what their options are, some architectural concepts, what might work for them based on their property size and so forth, and the zoning in the area. Then after they've done that, they go to the next phase, step 3, which looks at their own discernment as a congregation, get clear what they want. They might need then to do a congregational vote or the denominational vote. And then when they get clear, then we create a beautiful RFP, a request for proposals. So we totally, rather than the church's financing, rather than a developer coming to a church and say, we'd like to do this for you, we're equipping the church to go to a developer. So that RFP, that request for proposals, then tells exactly what the church wants that's feasible, and it gives their whole history and story, and it makes the church look really good. So they can then yield a really top affordable housing developer. And then that goes out to the development world, and then the church responds to those responses, and we give them support in knowing how to discern what a good developer, the ones that have responded, might be for them to consider. And then we'll help with the development agreement at the end to make sure everything that the church needs and wants out of the deal, we'll get that. So depending on the property size and the funding sources we've gotten up to 6 million back, 8 million back, and they haven't had to pay for any of the development. The developer does all of that, and the church gets paid for their long-term ground lease, and out of that we get paid. So that's a really brief summary of our process, but we feel very strongly that it's a very honorable process that is helping churches so they're not taken advantage of. We have found especially that Black churches are being taken advantage of left and right, and so we're especially concerned about that population. So I'd be happy to talk to you if it's something you're interested in seeing how such a team could be created. But there's also some folks I know in Chicago area that are already doing this work, and I might be able to put you in touch with them. There may be already a similar process there in your state. So yeah, it's a big decision and there's a lot of moving parts, but our process really allows congregations to be in charge and not be approached by someone they know nothing about, a developer that may not give them a fair deal. So that's a long answer. Thank you for your patience, everybody.
Cherie,
Yes, thank you so much. And I'm very grateful. And it just so happened that I always receive the emails, but I said, I'm going to make sure that I participate tonight. And it's been absolutely amazing. Thank you. And thank you for the work that you all do.
I'm giving you my contact so you can email me.
Yes, I have that. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
and Cherie, thanks for staying up late for us. It's 10:30 where you are.
Yeah, I'm out of school. I don't have any papers due, so I'm okay. But even if I did, I would still probably be up anyway. You know that. But thank you.
Yeah.
Well, we
And
had
I'm actually from San Francisco, so when you said Prop 13, I remember. I remember my
Yeah.
parents were benefiting from that. So yeah, thank you.
Well, we had budgeted an hour and a half of our time this evening, so we're officially going to wrap up the program. But everyone is welcome to stay on, chit chat. Feel free to unmute yourself if you have anything else you want to talk about. And like I've said, I've recorded all of your thoughts and questions from the chat. We have the survey. We have your contact information, so we'll make sure that you're included in your topics of interest and your questions are answered at future forums.
And we'll be sending you a link to this forum, which we're recording, and also some of the slideshows and other things. So you'll have that information in a couple of days. I'm going to stop the recording now. Thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you. This was very well done.